Hello, welcome to episode 1 of my podcast, name still TBD. My name is Leela Mae Thompson. I go by LM Tweet on the internet. I am a full-time artist and I'm 23 years old and I'm going into now my second year being a full-time artist. And so I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about a bunch of things. In this episode, I'm considering it to be like the prelude. Like this is technically episode 1, but it's like the prelude to the actual episode 1, where I'm just going to go over some of my background, like how I got to be where I am, what it is that I actually do, and kind of talk about some of the recent changes that have gone about, some of the things I've learned this past year, because there's been a lot, and also like my vision for this podcast, why I'm like doing this versus maybe something else. So yeah, let's just like get right into it. If you're watching this, you probably know who I am. I don't know why a stranger would. Oh, also this is going to be on YouTube in video form and also audio form. Hopefully where podcasts are listened to. Where I have yet to figure that out where I am currently in this time. But if you're listening to this on something other than YouTube, like my website, then clearly I figured it out because I'm a freaking genius, I guess. So first, let's go back, time machine, because it's weird because I've been on the internet for like a year now, and there are people who follow me and have followed me for months, but I also don't feel like anybody knows who I am, like really. I mean, I don't even know who I am. I'm 20 something. Does anyone really know who they are? I don't know. Anyway, so some background about me. I didn't study art in college. I studied ecosystem science and policy, and I went into college being a double major in marine biology and environmental engineering, which was just a recipe for disaster, honestly, because it turns out that my college, their environmental engineering department, was less focused on like environmental engineering and more on like super specific niche fields within the umbrella term of environmental engineering. So they really pushed people to be mechanical, and I was like, no, that is not why I came here. Like, what the heck? Anyway, so I ended up changing to ecosystem science and policy, which when I say that, everyone is always like, oh my God, ecosystem science. Wow, that sounds so official. It's one of those things where it sounds very official, and I did learn a lot, and I do not regret choosing that major. But when it came to looking for jobs, it was like, wait, what? Like, if you're an engineering major, if you're like a med student, like it's very clear, like you're going to be an engineer, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to like be a writer if you're an English major. Like, but not that you have to be a writer if you're an English major, or be an engineer if you're an engineering major, but you know what I mean? Like there's a clear field, a clear job title that you like search. You don't search in ecosystem science and policy, or like there's no like specific job, and like they never really talked to us about what jobs it was specifically that we could do. I took like anthropology classes, I took politics, I took history, I took economics, like I took a little bit of everything, which was fun, but it's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I don't want to work in a nonprofit. I don't want to do these certain things that I think most people would think. I didn't want to work in the government because bureaucracy. So, yeah, and I also minored in communication, which at my school, at least, there was like a stigma around comm majors, like communication majors. I wasn't one of those people. I was like different or whatever, but my main focus with communications was data visualization. So I do have a background with like computer programming and illustration kind of, and design. Like that's really what that concentration, I guess, was. To me, that's kind of what it felt like. Like I took a few studio classes with some really cool professors. So that's something I could talk about later in the future. But that's what I studied in college. And now I'm a full-time artist, so it's like, how do those connect? I think there's a lot of connections between like what I was doing in college. When I was in my sophomore year, I started a little mini project called Illustrated Research, which was a magazine, which I'm working on getting it up and running. I have not done anything physically, but I'm really hoping to get it up and running very soon again, because I just ran out of time throughout the rest of my college. But anyway, so I started that project, illustrated research, in college, and I started going to these little like maker fairs and zine fairs and things like that, and illustrated research was kind of focused on like the intersection between visual arts and illustration and or the scientific fields. And so I found through Instagram that there is a community around that: science art, sci art, scientific illustration, of course, which is an actual thing you can study in college and like major in, but there's also like this other bigger umbrella that incorporates, to me, scientific illustration in like the nitty-gritty terms of like making textbook illustrations. There's all these other people who like to draw fish or like to draw a microbiome, like things like that. So that was kind of like, that's kind of the target audience, which is basically me. And so I was going around to these fairs and things like that, and I ran into this woman who picked up one of my mini zines at the time. Kind of like a few months went by. She ended up being someone who works at one of the institutions on Miami Beach, the Cultural Institutions Art Museum. And long story short, I have been working for that museum. I'm going into my 4th year working with them. I do like a very specific program that has specific funding and like all this stuff. That's something that I do and have done for years now. We're going to be joined by Milo. I have a cat named Milo. Everyone calls him fat when they see him, and honestly, I just feel insulted every time because I'm like, he's not fat. He's just a very large cat. He is larger than the average cat. He's not fat. He does have not long hair, but like longer hair than most average cats. So that makes him look more fluffy, but he is not fat. He is not overweight. He has the little floopy thing that all cats get when they have been altered, you know, but he's a normal cat. He's like, I don't know, 9. Still as stupid as he was when he was a kitten, honestly. But anyways, back to me. So I was doing like zine fairs all throughout college. Like my freshman year, there was a zine fair on campus, and I was like walking around like, what is this wizardry? Like my mom growing up has a gift basket business, and so I've always gone to like craft fairs and stuff like that. Like I was her little helper going on weekends in the holiday season. So I've been to craft fairs before, like a lot, but a zine fair is like a craft fair but for young people, and I was like, oh my gosh, like earrings, clothing. If you don't know what a zine is, it's basically like a self-published booklet. The word zine comes from the word magazine. I believe they started in like the 80s around punk culture. I could be completely wrong, but now they're like pretty common within like the illustrator and creative communities, especially with like younger people, and I just freaking love them. And that's kind of what my program that I do with my institution is kind of based around. It's based around zines, which I freaking love. Fun fact about me, I had someone include me in their PhD thesis. Like I'm in someone's PhD thesis. Like they wrote about my program. I have yet to read it myself, but I need to get her email. The pandemic happened, kind of like she was supposed to have a presentation, and then the pandemic happened. Anyways, we're catching up to kind of like how I got to be where I am now a little bit, but I have a whole ass rant that I have to go on before I get to where we are today. Let me just paint the picture here. Or maybe later, I don't know. How should I do this? I was going to write notes, and then I kept putting it off, and then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sit down. I tried to use my microphone that I bought, couldn't find a cord, so I was like, nope, we're just going to go. We just got to get this done. We just got to get it over with. We got to push on through this thing that I'm doing, which is the podcast, which I'm doing now. I did have a lot of coffee this morning. Well, it wasn't a lot. It was just, I'm getting sidetracked. Okay? College, zine fairs. That's where we are. So I was making zines all throughout college. I worked with this institution, and my senior year of college, I started working my summer of junior year into all throughout my senior year. I was working as a fieldwork assistant with a PhD student. So I went to college in South Florida, and this PhD student is researching amphibians and reptiles in the Everglades. And if you don't know how a PhD works, which I would think that some people don't, because unless you're doing one, it's like, why would you know? But then again, I didn't really know how college worked until I was like doing it. So I've just always been someone that like didn't really ask too many questions that I didn't want to know the answers to or didn't care to know the answers to until I like needed to know the answers to them. Anyways, if you don't know, with a PhD, if I were to summarize as someone who is not thinking about getting one, but I did consider it, basically you do a ton of research for a long time about a pretty niche subject, but at the same time you have different chapters, and each chapter is like a research project in and of itself. So I don't want to give away this person's like PhD thesis because I don't know if I should or can. People are kind of weird about it in some fields, especially like biomed. But anyways, let's just say in one chapter he's studying like one adaptation, and in another chapter he would be studying another animal and their population dynamics, and then like in the third and final chapter he might be studying like trends in weather, climate, or whatever. And those would kind of all fit together to answer like one big overall question of like, how is blank affecting blank kind of thing. So for example, these experiments for chapter 1, 2, and 3, each experiment might take 2 to 3 years in and of themselves, or they could be going on over the period of like 6 years for this person. So anyways, I was a fieldwork assistant, which basically means I get to do all the fun stuff without all the boring stuff. Like I get to go and hold all the cool animals. I like frogs and snakes, so I get to hold all the frogs and snakes. Obviously, if you don't like frogs and snakes, you're not going to like the job. And it's also in Florida, in the Everglades. The mosquitoes in the summer are, let me tell you, a beast in and of themselves. There are positives and negatives to every job, but I really enjoyed doing fieldwork, and I really loved doing that. So when I graduated, and I was like, my degree, ecosystem science and policy, is not really like, como se dice, directing me in one specific field. Like I have all these options because I have all this experience doing all these different things, which is really fun and cool and great. But at the same time, it's like I don't really know what it is that I enjoy doing. And at that point, all I knew that I enjoyed doing was fieldwork, which had nothing to do with my major. Like I ended up getting the job through a friend who was in the biology department, which I took one bio class in my 4 years. Like it wasn't part of my major to be involved with that like side of the school. So it's just kind of random that I ended up doing it, but I really loved it because I love being outside. I've always been pretty active. I love animals and I love the environment and like being around nature. And Florida is like, especially South Florida, in my opinion, is like the best place in the United States for nature. Personally, but I might be a little bit biased. But anyways, so I knew I really liked doing that. So I started looking at fieldwork jobs, and there were a few that like were popping up because unlike my major, with my fieldwork job, I now had a specific set of skills that like not that many people had. I had this very niche knowledge, and it was very clear, like if I want to do fieldwork, I'm going to do a similar job. I'm going to look for similar jobs that take like the same types of measurements and use the same types of tools. It was very like clear. But I graduated in 2020. I didn't even technically graduate. That's a whole story. We're not going to get into it. Spring break, March 2020, is when I was starting to really freak out because I was about to graduate and I was looking down into my future and I was like, oh shit. What? You know? So I vividly remember this conversation in my head. I don't think my parents remember, but I vividly remember the conversation. I was like home for spring break, looking at possible, jobs and such, and just really starting to like have a full-on mental breakdown about it because I was like, my major doesn't point me in one direct way, but then here are all these fieldwork jobs, but then I'm seeing all this stuff on the news about this COVID thing, like what the heck is going on? Just very stressful. And basically, my cat has gunk in his eyes. Don't you know you're supposed to wash your face in the morning? You're supposed to be self-cleaning. So I remember like going downstairs, talking to my parents, and my mom said, well, why don't you just, take a year off and do art full time? And I was like, what? What? I'm asking you, do I do a nonprofit? Do I work for the government? Do I do field work? Those are the options. She's like, well, what if you just did art? And I was like, no, like pick one of these. Pick one of these other three options. Not, what are you talking about? Like, I can't be an artist full time. I don't have any money saved up. Like, I don't, have a savings account. And I was like, and you're not going to pay for it. And she's like, well, why not? Like, why don't we pay for it? And I was like, you're insane. Like, you've never, like, at that point, up until, I guess, 2020, like, growing up, I would never say that we grew up poor. Like, I'm never going to sit here and say that because I feel like that takes away from other people's experiences, but we were definitely not upper class. I would say we were like lower middle class, and my mom works in the housing industry, so she lost her job in 2008. So money just growing up has always been very tight. When I was, I never like got an allowance as a kid. Like, no, that was never something the only time I got like money was from birthdays. But my parents always taught my brother and I like the value of money and the value of saving it. And yeah, so in high school, I think I was like junior year, I had like saved up my money from my whole entire lifetime to buy a car so that I could go to work to get a job, to have money for when I went off to college. And that was like a really big deal because I hadn't ever really had money like accumulated before until that point. Like the only money I had was from like saving up for years. And so anytime I wanted to buy anything, like I had to buy it myself. Like I bought my first camera, things like that. So like the idea that my parents would like be paying my rent was just, I don't know. I guess it's kind of a pride thing, but it was also like, no, like you have to pay for you don't have money to do that. But over the years, my mom has worked her ass off. Like, she's worked her ass off. Like, I cannot remember a time in my life where my mother was not working overtime. And just quick little anecdote, there was one point where we only had one car, but my brother has always been super athletic. I have a younger brother, and he's 2 years younger, and he was playing he's always played like multiple spring sports, and I've always been very serious about one sport at one given time. Growing up, it was mostly basketball, and so I remember vividly like me coming home from middle school on the bus, and then my brother and I getting in the car with my dad, and then him driving my brother to be dropped off at like his basketball practice, and then me still in the car driving to drop me off at my basketball practice, like across town 30 minutes. And then once we were done with basketball practice at like 8 or 9, he would pick me up and then go pick up my brother. And then we'd all be in the car and then go pick up my mom, who was finishing work at like 8 or 9. And then we'd all be home. And then like in the morning, we'd all pile in the car before we had to pick up, like go to the bus stop, drop my mom off at work at like 6 in the morning so that my brother and I could be in time for my bus. It was just a whole thing. Like that's kind of how, like money was never like gone, but it was very tight growing up. So the idea that my parents would be paying for my rent was like, absolutely not. Like, absolutely not. Why are you doing that? And I cried. That was a tipping point for me. I had a full-on breakdown. I like stormed upstairs. I was like, you're insane. Like I've never yelled at my parents. I have never, but I was like, I'm done with this conversation. You are not giving me the answers I wanted. You're giving me this completely outrageous other option that is absolutely insane. You're crazy. Like, I'm getting a job. I'm working 9 to 5, and you're not telling me which 9 to 5 job to get. Bye, please. Please leave. So I went upstairs, had a little think. And then I ended up, everything was fine. Like, we weren't like arguing or whatever. It was just kind of like I was overwhelmed by that. And so by the time I ended up driving home for spring break, the world was kind of ending. And I was like, you know what, Mom and Dad, like, I know I kind of freaked out a little bit, but I kind of like your idea because I don't think I'm going to be able to find a job. Like, all my friends were looking for jobs, and it was like, at that point, traveling for fieldwork jobs was out of the question. I had some opportunities maybe like in Belize or something, and it's like, that's just not gonna happen. So I took my mom and dad up on the offer, and I feel like there's this like conversation, and maybe we'll talk about this later in depth, but there is kind of like this, I don't know what the word is, but people, I feel, immediately look for like how someone got to be where they are. And a lot of the times, especially on the internet, I'm mostly on TikTok, so it's like really negative and toxic. But a lot of the times when people find that out, it's like, oh, well, your parents paid for you. And I'll sit here proud as hell being like, yeah, my parents paid for me. They worked their asses off for 12 years so that I could have this specific opportunity, and I am not so far messing it up. So, pretty good investment on their money. Like, I'm so proud of my parents, and I will never be embarrassed or like ashamed of the fact that my parents have paid my way. But I also know that like me trying to explain like my business model and like what I do is like just unattainable for so many people. And for me, the thought of it was unattainable until 2 years ago or a year ago when my parents were like, hey, let's do this. I was like, no. I've always wanted to be an artist. I've always been a creative person. And when I've talked to my parents since then, they said like, you know, we wouldn't have done that or offered that if we didn't believe in you, if we didn't think that you could like do it. So great. But yeah, so it wasn't like out of the blue, like, oh, here's this random thing you've never done. Like I've always been an artist. I've always been creative. I've had my own like small business. And like I said before, I was going to zine fairs all throughout college. Like one time I traveled like 4 hours, like one way. So 8 hours round trip in one day to go to a specific zine fair. Like I've been hustling my little booty off, like on the side hustle thing. And like I worked all throughout college. So I don't want to like sit here and like defend myself, but that's just kind of my perspective. I'm very proud of my parents. I'm very thankful for my parents, and I would not be here without them. But at the same time, I don't come from like generational wealth. Like I come from a very supportive family and a very hardworking family on both sides. So I'm just very thankful that I am here today. And I'm very proud of my parents. Heck yeah, my parents paid for me for a year, because now they're not. I pay my own rent now, but yeah, I just feel like I had to say that. So anyways, so I started out day one, self-employed. I was like, whoa, what is going on? What do I do? How do I make money? It was like really, I don't know. Looking back, like, you know, obviously we feel nostalgic for the past. Like I would give anything to go back and be where I was in May of 2020. It was just like, I don't know. I don't want to say fate or destiny, but it's just like things happen that it's like, wow, that if that hadn't happened and then this hadn't happened, then this wouldn't have happened. And so I feel just like really, really lucky. But every time I think that to myself, I remind myself that of like that silly little like motivational quote is like, luck is what happens when preparation meets success or something. Like, you know, like when you get handed the moment on a silver platter, if you fumble the bag, then you're not lucky. You've kind of like failed and you got to try again. But if you get handed the moment on a silver platter and you're like, all right, I got this, and you handle it and you do it, then people are like, oh, wow, so lucky. So anyways, I started, you know, being self-employed. I was like, I wasn't even painting, honestly. Like I've never really, now I'm a painter, but like I hadn't really painted since high school, like, and even then it wasn't like super intense. Like I did a few paintings. Like I've never really been like a painter. I started out like in 4th grade. I was really into colored pencils, which I still think are like, they're a really great beginner medium. They're pretty affordable and they don't make a mess for the most part. And you really learn, I think, about colors and shading and values and the technical skills. So I really think colored pencils are like the way to go, honestly, if you're trying to start out and like want to get better. Colored pencil it up, you know. But so I wasn't really a painter, and so it was like the summer of 2020. Let's all go back in that time. The world was kind of falling apart, and whether you were like isolating from COVID or not, like things were just, it just was what is going on. So I had at that point moved to a new city completely by myself. Like my mom helped me move, but I moved to a city where I didn't know anybody. I just moved there because I wanted to be closer to my family. Like I didn't want to be all the way in Florida when I couldn't really feel safe getting on a flight, especially because I have elderly grandparents and things like that. So I moved to be closer to my family, but that meant that I was in a place that I like didn't know anyone or I hardly had anyone around. So it was just me basically, and kind of like no distractions. And it's just like me, it's kind of like it is now, just me in my apartment, like figuring out what I'm going to do today. But now I have a lot more direction and things I actually have to do. But at that point, it was just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And then George Floyd died, which also for everybody else was like, what is happening? And so that really just kind of like catapulted me in a way. I just immediately had like ideas and thoughts, obviously lots of feelings. I was pretty much bedridden for like a week or two, where I would just kind of like wake up, doom scroll on my TikTok and like Instagram, cry, take a nap, repeat, eat a snack, repeat for days. So that was not great, but it is the way it is. So I started making art. I started painting, just because really that was like the quickest way to get the ideas I wanted out. And my paintings take longer generally, but it was quicker than if I was doing colored pencils. So that's kind of how I like settled on painting, was because it was a way to get my ideas out, use all the colors, have all the detail, but also like get them done fairly quickly on a larger scale than if I was doing just colored pencil. So I started painting. I did my tear them down painting first, and then I did my Jimmy Lee Jackson, I started making my political paintings, and then I had a video like go viral on TikTok. And I think that like really comes back to my like luck is what happens when preparation makes success. Like when that happened, I was ready. Like I had a printer, I had everything ready and set up to be running a business, but I just didn't have like the market. And then all of a sudden that video went viral, and then all of a sudden I had the market, and things just kind of have gone up from there. And so then a few months later I had my empty chair video, which I can talk about that in a whole thing, because that is a whole like drama saga basically, but we're running out of time and I don't want to like ramble on, because clearly I can just ramble when I've had my 3 shots of espresso in my iced coffee with hazelnut and simple syrup. So in summary, to get to like where I am today, I was doing all of that, like doing all the political stuff, but at a certain point, like what really hit me was I was doing all the political stuff. I still have a ton of ideas. I'm still making a lot of that same work, just like a little bit less visually, and I can talk about that in another episode if we want. But I was planning, and I am still going to do a painting about the Derek Chauvin trial, the police officer who shot and killed, or not shot, but the police officer who killed George Floyd. I'm doing a painting on that, and I had this brilliant idea to like share the process on Instagram. And for me, you know, I'm a very upbeat, like happy person. And so like, it's very easy for me to like separate the work from like the process and the joy of making something artful and like artistic, and like to just enjoy the making of it, and to separate what it is I'm actually making. Because if I were to focus on that, I don't think I would be able to get the painting done. So I completely understand how this would have come across to people, and like why. Basically what happened was I was sharing like the process of planning the painting and, you know, figuring things out design-wise and colors and all this stuff. And I had 2 white girls send me a DM being like, I'm so excited for this painting. And it just rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, wait, hold the... What? You're excited about this painting? Because I am excited about it artistically, but I am not excited about this painting at all. Like, it's like this weird thing, and to have someone who's so not me and could never possibly understand what it's like to be me or anyone in my adjacent, it was like very jarring and very kind of like, whoa. And I had kind of been feeling for a while that like, honestly, a lot of the energy from the summer of 2020 was dying down. And so for me to continue making art, the art that I wanted to make, that I felt really passionate about, that I think really speaks, and that if I were to be remembered for anything, I'd want to be remembered for the paintings I made all of last year. But at the same time, like being on the internet adds this other layer to it that makes it a little tricky. And so I kind of had this like come to Jesus moment with those DMs, and I was like, I gotta switch this up. Like, I cannot be harping these, like, business-wise, I can't just be doing these things that people don't care about anymore. Business-wise, it's not a great move. But personally, that's all I want to do. So it's kind of like I've had to, over the past few months, mostly since like January, now we're in like August, September. So it's been a while, but I've been trying to like figure out and cope with what it is, like finding a balance between making art that a lot of people like all the time, no matter the political climate, and the art that I really like making that I feel is really impactful and really important. And I think I've kind of settled on that, but I think we're going to have to save that for next time. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I've been making and working very hard on my first collection of paintings, which are kind of behind me, which are very different from the paintings I was making most of 2020. And that's kind of how I got to that decision to like pivot and change things a little bit publicly. And so far, so good. Honestly, so far, so good. And I'm currently working on my winter collection, which there's some sneak peeks a little bit, and I don't like hide things, but there are like things that I'm keeping like off there, but I'm going to talk about them here. And I'm planning on doing a behind the scenes like video series on my Patreon. By the time you're seeing this publicly, if you're not a Patreon member, those videos are available on Patreon. So go subscribe, help your girl out. It's $5 a month to make my dreams come true. That's going to be my like elevator pitch slogan for my Patreon. That's a whole drama series too, because boy, let me tell you, when I had that video go viral in August, I went from having 10 Patreon members to having over 400 Patreon members. And that was just kind of like a whole thing from the start. And I've recently decided, for a lot of different reasons, to stop sending out monthly stickers to my Patreon members, which I realized was kind of like the selling point for people to join. But you can't track stamped envelopes, especially international, and international mail. Tracked mail is very expensive. And so there's been this whole like background drama for me, and it's been a huge stressor because I hate letting people down. And knowing that I'm sending out 300 envelopes a month and having no idea whether they get there, having no idea whether the person that wanted it is actually receiving the product, you know, which is the sticker, it just feels really weird. And then knowing that like my work has been about like Black trauma and like really upsetting events, and then having people be like, "Where's my sticker?" It's like, I'm sorry, like I didn't realize. So I've just decided to cancel the stickers for now. Not saying they won't come back, but yeah, there's been a lot of learning, a lot of growing. I think that a lot of the struggles and personal things that I've had to like deal with, because I'm just in my head all day, every day, are like very common things for artists and like young people, especially people just graduating. But also as like a biracial Black artist, I think a lot of the struggles of like, do I profit off of my trauma because that's what brings a lot of attention, or do I just make happy, beautiful things and like feel guilty about not making the art that matters? You know, it's kind of like all those things going on at once. And then it's like, but also like if I make art about the things that are upsetting to me personally and the ones that I really feel speak the most, my target audience will never be majority like who I want it to be. There's a lack of control, and if I have lack of control, I'd rather just paint pretty things, I think, for now. We'll see. But I'm sharing as much as I can through my Patreon as a way to like, I guess if you want to keep up to date on everything, Patreon is the place to be. But yeah, so I'm currently working on my winter collection, which I'm very excited about, and I've just been having a lot of fun. I feel like I finally struck a balance that works for me, which I will gladly talk about more because I could talk forever. But lastly, I just kind of wanted to talk about this podcast and like what my vision is. basically, I have a YouTube channel, which is where this podcast is, also living on YouTube. And I've been trying for forever to make YouTube videos, but the act of filming myself making my art and the act of editing myself making my art is just like, it takes a lot out of me. But editing a podcast episode takes a little bit less out of me, I think. So I'm doing this. I'm going to give this a try, like a good solid college try, like a good solid weekly podcast episodes. I think Mondays are good days because it's like starting off the week, you're waking up, you're going to work, or you're doing the thing. Hi, it's me, so I'm going to try. I plan on kind of doing it in like seasons. So this first season will just be like me talking. Sorry. Maybe I'll get other people. I don't know, but I really like the video aspect of it. That way, because if I do feel myself making something, I could put it on YouTube and you can watch me paint or whatever. But the second season, I do have some plans, and I do have some people I want to interview and talk to, because I think that a lot of the times, like art related podcasts, I don't know, like I feel like I would ask people different questions that like you might not normally ask. And I am toying with ideas for the podcast name. My first video that went viral on TikTok was about male artist energy, which it's polarizing and it causes a lot of stir, which I think is good, because it's like, if people are talking about it, then that's good in a way, especially being on the internet. But for me, let me explain what male artist energy is. It was like, it came about with like me and my friends joking, because I've always been surrounded by like creative people. And so naturally, if I'm surrounded by creative women and females, I'm also surrounded by creative men and males. And there is just a vibe. If you know, there's just a vibe that certain creative, I'll say people, but it's mostly from my experience and a lot of people I know, males, just have this aura about them. And I have my theories as to why it is, but it's the male artist energy thing is mostly a joke. And it's mostly, for me, what it means to me, if I may share that on this podcast, that's literally just me talking in my room by myself to a camera and in my phone microphone. For me, it's about being more confident. Like, I've never been someone who feels very confident talking to other people face to face in a camera, and by myself, I talk to myself all the time. I hype myself up. I'm the best, I'm the empress of my own kingdom. But in front of other people, I'm like really bad about talking about myself. So, for me, male artist energy is just like embracing and like no excuses. If you fail, don't tell anyone. Just keep moving forward. Shoot for the stars. Go for really big opportunities, which for me, I think the biggest leap that I took was doing my fall collection. That was such a huge risk financially. Like, I had saved up my money for months to be able to do something like this and to do it and like pull it off the way that I did. Male artist energy, really, I'm pat myself on the back, like to me, male artist energy just means being a little bit more cocky. It means being a little bit more arrogant. It means a little bit more like just being like, I'm an artist and I'm here to art, like that's what that means. And I think that more people in general, regardless of who you are, need that like blind cock. You're like, that arrogant asshole artist kind of energy, regardless of gender. But saying male artist energy, I think clicks with a lot more people and they understand it, in my opinion. So I always have people being like, it's not a gender thing and we need to stop the gender divide. I can pull up some receipts on a future episode. I think I will go into like the divide between like male and female spaces in the art world, but all these possibilities. So that's kind of what I'm toying with, like female artist energy, but like the male is like, in parentheses, or the FE is in parentheses. I don't know. I'm going to play around with it. We'll see. That's my idea. I think it'll catch people's attention. Let me know your thoughts if you have any other ideas for podcast names besides that. And follow me on Instagram. Subscribe on YouTube if you're watching. If you're listening, not on YouTube, go to my YouTube and subscribe anyways. Join my Patreon to give me some more confidence in doing this. And It's $5 a month to make my dreams come true. And yes, I will be sharing about my winter collection here and on my Patreon, and about all my paintings that I'm working on and all the things. So ask me questions, give me future topic ideas, name ideas. Okay, that's it. That's all. I'm out talked for now. I'm going to go talk to myself some more, but I'm done talking to this camera in this room by myself because it makes me feel a little crazy sometimes. It's really just like me, myself, and I. My mom lives with me part-time, and my brother lives too, but like a lot of the times it's just me in my studio. That's where we are right now, in my studio. Just talking to my cat. And honestly, I'm not even talking to him. I catch myself talking to myself, and then I'm like, you got that, Milo, right? And he's like sleeping. So give me a thumbs up if you talk to yourself too. Okay, that's all I have. We will pick up kind of where we left off, and I think I'm going to talk about Andy Warhol next. I don't know. We'll see. Bye. Bye. I'll see you later. I'll see you later. Okay. I think that was pretty good. Pretty good. We talked for a good amount of time. 42 minutes is a lot of time. I don't want to watch this back, though. I should hire someone else to edit this for me, and I really hope that I pressed the record button. Did I? I did. We got 2 minutes left. Okay, bye, everybody.